What happens when a man who has everything decides his pregnant wife is worth nothing in the heart of New York City, inside one of the world's most luxurious restaurants? A tech millionaire doesn't just walk out on his wife, he detonates a bomb on her life, leaving her humiliated and alone. He thought his money could bury the secret that his power made him untouchable. But he never counted on one thing: a stranger in the corner, a simple act of kindness, and a single photo that would ignite a firestorm. This isn't just a breakup story. This is the story of how one man's cruelty turned an entire city against him, and how the woman he tried to erase rose from the ashes to reclaim her life. The air in Le Bernardin is different. It's not just filtered, it feels polished, carrying the scent of money, saffron, and ambition. For Annalise Croft, it had once felt like a magical bubble, a world she'd entered on the arm of her whirlwind husband, the tech magnate Julian Croft. Tonight, the bubble was suffocating her. At 28, Annalise possessed a quiet grace that often made her seem like a beautiful accessory to Julian's loud success. Her auburn hair was styled in soft waves, her simple navy blue dress elegant and understated, chosen specifically to accommodate the gentle 5-month swell of her pregnancy. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, a gesture that had become second nature. Across the table, Julian wasn't looking at her. He was staring at his phone, a sleek black monolith that seemed to be a permanent extension of his hand. His brow, usually smooth and confident for magazine covers, was furrowed in a way Annalise recognized. It was the look he got before a hostile takeover, the look that meant someone somewhere was about to be financially obliterated. She never imagined it would be her. "Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the civilized hum of the restaurant. "You haven't said a word since we sat down." He didn't look up. His thumb swiped dismissively across the screen. "I'm busy, Annalise. This merger is critical. I know, but it's our anniversary. You promised. No phones." Finally, he placed the phone face down on the pristine white tablecloth, but the act was one of aggression, not concession. His blue eyes, usually the color of a warm Caribbean sea, were now chipped ice. "An anniversary," he said, the words clipped. "Right. Another obligation." Annalise flinched. "An obligation, Julian? What's wrong? You've been like this for weeks." Distant, cold, she leaned forward, her voice pleading. "Is it about the baby? Are you scared because we can talk about it?" That was the wrong thing to say. He looked at her, then a full, piercing glare that made her feel small, naive. "The baby," he scoffed, a bitter, ugly sound in the opulent room. He leaned in his voice a venomous whisper that only she could hear. "Let me be perfectly clear. This situation," he gestured vaguely toward her stomach, "is a complication I did not plan for. It's a liability." The word hit her like a physical blow. Liability, not their child, not a miracle. A line item on a balance sheet of his life. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she fought to keep them from falling. She would not cry in Le Bernardin. "How can you say that?" she stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "This is our baby, your baby." Julian leaned back, a chillingly calm expression settling on his handsome face. He looked around the room, at the captains in their starched uniforms, at the clinking glasses of vintage champagne, at the powerful people in their expensive clothes. He was judging the scene, deciding on his next move. "My life is at a critical juncture, Annalise," he said, his voice now devoid of all emotion. "The Croft Innovations merger with Omnicorp is the culmination of my entire career. It will make me a billionaire, not just a millionaire." It will give me the power I deserve. And power requires a certain image, a certain freedom. And I'm not part of that image. The question was a fragile thing already breaking in her throat. He gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. A pregnant wife. A screaming infant. It's messy. It's a distraction. My board needs to see a man who is laser-focused, not a man tied down by domesticity. His words were so clinical, so detached, it was as if he were discussing a failed product line. He was liquidating an asset. Her, their child. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a platinum credit card, placing it on the table. This should cover the meal. And a taxi. Annalise stared at the card, then back at his face, searching for a flicker of the man she had married. The man who had once quoted poetry to her in Central Park, who had held her and promised her the world. He was gone. In his place was this cold, ruthless stranger. A taxi to where Julian, she whispered, her voice trembling. Our home. He stood up, straightening his bespoke Tom Ford suit. He was a portrait of success, a god of the modern age, and he was about to smite her. That's the other thing, he said, looking down at her, his 6'2" frame casting a long shadow. The locks at the penthouse have been changed. My lawyer has already been in touch with a realtor to sell it. Your things will be moved to a storage facility. You'll get a notification. He paused, letting the cruelty sink in. I believe the term is irreconcilable differences. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, will be in touch. Don't try to contact me directly. He turned to leave. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Annalise. Julian, no, she cried out, her voice louder now, causing a few heads to turn. You can't do this. I'm pregnant with your child. Where am I supposed to go? He stopped, but didn't turn around. His final words floated back to her, an epitaph for their marriage. That sounds like a personal problem, not a corporate one. And then he was gone. He walked out of Le Bernardin without a backward glance, leaving Annalise sitting alone at a table for two with a multi-course tasting menu on the way, a useless credit card on the table, and the ruins of her life scattered around her feet. The hum of the restaurant suddenly felt deafening. Every clink of a fork, every burst of laughter was a mockery. She was a spectacle of shame. The tears she had held back now flowed freely, silent streams of grief and terror tracing paths down her cheeks. She was homeless, husbandless, and utterly devastatingly alone. But she wasn't entirely unnoticed. In a discreet corner of the restaurant, a man named Leo Vincent had been dining alone, trying to celebrate a small freelance journalism gig he'd just landed. He wasn't in their world. His suit was off the rack, and he was nursing a single glass of wine, trying to make it last. He had seen the whole exchange. He saw the beautiful, visibly pregnant woman, the arrogant man with ice in his veins, and the brutal public execution of a relationship. He saw Julian Croft stride out his face, a mask of indifference. And he saw Annalise crumble. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to do something. Leo was not a man of means, not like them. He was a writer who scraped by a man who believed in stories and in people. And he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that this was a story that needed to be told. He watched as the sommelier approached Annalise's table with an expensive bottle of wine, only to stop confused by the empty seat and the woman's silent tears. He saw her shame, the way she tried to shrink into herself. Leo discreetly flagged down his waiter. He paid his own bill, and then, with a quiet word, asked for the check for Annalise's table. The waiter, a seasoned professional who had seen every form of human drama, raised an eyebrow, but complied. The bill was astronomical, more than Leo's rent. He didn't hesitate. He took out his own credit card, the one he used for emergencies, and handed it over. "And please, Leo," said softly to the waiter, "don't tell her who paid. Just tell her it's been taken care of. And give her this." He scribbled a quick note on a napkin. "Your story doesn't end here. Your strength is greater than his cruelty." He watched as the waiter delivered the message. He saw the flicker of confusion and then a glimmer of something else, not quite hope, but a momentary reprieve from despair in Annalise's eyes. She looked around, searching for the source of this anonymous kindness. Leo stayed in his corner, unseen. As he prepared to leave, he did one more thing. He took out his phone, the same tool Julian had used for his cruelty. But Leo used his for a different purpose. He didn't take a picture of Annalise in her grief. That would be a violation. Instead, he took a picture of the empty chair, the untouched breadbasket, and the platinum credit card Julian had so contemptuously thrown on the table. He opened his social media app and began to write. He wasn't a major influencer, just a man with a few thousand followers who appreciated his thoughtful takes on city life. He didn't name names. He didn't need to. He wrote tonight at Le Bernardin, a place of supposed elegance. "I witnessed the ugliest act I've ever seen. I saw a man, the picture of wealth and power, tell his visibly pregnant wife she was a liability and abandon her. He left her crying, homeless on their anniversary. He thought his money made him a king, but all it did was reveal what a truly poor man he is. To the woman he left behind, a stranger paid your bill, not out of pity, but out of respect for the strength you will find. New York is a city of millions, and tonight we are all on your side." He attached the photo of the empty chair and the credit card. He added a hashtag, Le Bernardin Betrayal. Then he posted it and walked out into the New York night, having no idea that he had just lit the fuse on a bomb far bigger than the one Julian Croft had detonated inside the restaurant. Annalise didn't know who paid the bill. She was too numb to question it, too exhausted to feel anything but a profound, hollow ache. The waiter had simply informed her, with practiced discretion, that there was nothing to worry about. The note on the napkin felt like a lifeline in a churning ocean of despair. She folded it carefully, its simple words, a tiny shield against Julian's calculated cruelty, and put it in her purse. She walked out of Le Bernardin into the humid Manhattan night, a ghost in a city that had suddenly become alien and hostile. The penthouse she had called home was no longer hers. Her phone buzzed. A sterile automated email informed her that Croft Consolidated Holdings had arranged for the contents of her closet to be moved to a secure, climate-controlled facility. It was a corporate gutting of her life. Panic began to claw at her throat again. Where could she go? Her family was in Oregon, a world away. Her friends, they were mostly their friends' couples in Julian's orbit who valued loyalty to power above all else. Calling them would be a further humiliation. She had one close friend from college, Chloe, a fiercely independent artist living in a tiny walk-up in Brooklyn. Swallowing her pride, Annalise hailed a cab, her voice a croak as she gave the address. Meanwhile, Leo Vincent's post began its silent, inexorable creep across the digital landscape. It started small. A few of his followers, moved by the raw emotion of the post, shared it. One of them was a prominent food blogger with 50,000 followers, who had a long-standing feud with Le Bernardin's reservation policy. She shared it with a scathing comment Forget the food, the real drama at Le Bernardin is off the menu. Human decency is not included. That was the first spark. The hashtag Le Bernardin betrayal began to trend in the New York area. People who had never heard of Leo Vincent were now seeing the stark photo of the empty chair and the credit card. The anonymity of the subjects made the story universal. He could be any powerful man. She could be any woman who had been wronged. By the time Annalise was curled up on Chloe's lumpy sofa, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of turpentine and chamomile tea, the story was mutating. Internet sleuths armed with nothing but a photograph of a credit card and a location went to work. The name on the card wasn't visible, but the distinctive platinum sheen and the corner of the issuing bank's logo were enough for some. Someone zoomed in, enhanced the image, and cross-referenced it with a recent Forbes article titled "The Titans of Tomorrow," which featured a glowing profile of Julian Croft. The article included a photo of him stepping out of a car holding a wallet from which the corner of the exact same platinum card was peeking out. The connection was made. By midnight, the anonymous man had a name: Julian Croft. The pregnant wife was by extension Annalise Croft. The anniversary story was corroborated by a gushing society column from the previous year about their fairy tale wedding. The firestorm erupted. Julian was in a celebratory meeting with his COO, Serafina Vance, in his gleaming office overlooking the city. Serafina was everything. Annalise was not sharp, ambitious with a predator's smile and a mind like a steel trap. She was his equal in ruthlessness, and the affair they'd been having for the past 6 months was one of mutual corporate convenience. The merger was their shared goal, and Annalise was, as they'd agreed, an unacceptable risk. "The board is practically salivating," Serafina said, clinking her glass of scotch against his. "With Omnicorp's hardware and our software, we'll own the market. No more distractions." Her phone buzzed. Then Julian's. Then they both buzzed again, relentlessly. "What the hell is this?" Julian said, his eyes narrowing as he read the notifications. His publicist was calling. His lawyer. His mother. He saw Leo's post now shared over 100,000 times. He saw his name attached. He saw the hashtag. Croft cruelty was now trending alongside to Le Bernardin betrayal. How he snarled, throwing his phone onto the desk. "How did they know? No one could have heard me." Serafina was already typing furiously on her laptop, her face a mask of cold fury. "Someone posted a photo of your card. They connected it to you. The narrative is unflattering." "Unflattering," Julian roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "It's a character assassination. I'm being called a monster. This is right before the merger. The Omnicorp board are a bunch of old-fashioned moralists. This could kill the deal." "Calm down, Julian," Serafina said, her voice icy. "Panic is unprofessional. We need to get ahead of this. We'll issue a statement. A joint, amicable separation. Cite privacy. The usual." "Amicable?" He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "There was a witness, Serafina. Someone who heard what I said. Liability. That word is everywhere." Leo Vincent's phone, meanwhile, was melting down. He'd gone from a small-time writer to the city's most sought-after source overnight. The New York Post, the Daily Mail, even the New York Times had sent him messages. Local news channels wanted him on their morning shows. He was no longer just a witness. He was the story's catalyst. He sat in his small apartment, the city lights twinkling outside, a deep sense of foreboding, mixed with a journalist's thrill. He had exposed an injustice, but he had also thrown a private woman's life into a public circus. He read the comments, the vitriol directed at Julian, but also the intense, sometimes invasive speculation about Annalise. He knew he had to handle this responsibly. He ignored the tabloids and responded to a single email from a respected investigative journalist at the Times known for her integrity. The next morning, the city woke up to the story, splashed across every news outlet. Julian Croft's smiling, handsome face was next to the photo of the empty chair. Headlines screamed, "Millionaire mogul dumps, pregnant wife for merger, and the betrayal at Le Bernardin, how a stranger's kindness exposed a titan's cruelty." Le Bernardin itself was forced to issue a statement confirming a private incident and comping meals for any pregnant women who dined with them. For the next week, a PR move that only added fuel to the fire. In Brooklyn, Annalise woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. Chloe was standing in the doorway, holding a tablet with a grim expression. "Annie," she said, softly, "you need to see this. It's everywhere." Annalise sat up, her body aching. Chloe showed her the screen. She saw her own name. She saw the headlines. She read Leo's post, the words from the napkin now broadcast to the world. A wave of nausea, unrelated to her pregnancy, washed over her. Her private hell was now public entertainment. But then she read the comments. Thousands upon thousands of them. "Annalise, if you're reading this, stay strong. You and your baby deserve better. What a despicable man. I'm selling my Croft Innovations stock today. Sending love to this woman. We've got your back." Who was the stranger who paid that man is a hero? A new hashtag was emerging, Team Annalise. The public, so often fickle, had made its decision. They had seen a simple story of good versus evil, of callous wealth versus vulnerable motherhood. And they had chosen their side. The city, in its vast, chaotic, and often anonymous way, was wrapping a protective embrace around her. Julian Croft had tried to make her invisible, to erase her. Instead, the whole world was now watching. His own attempts at damage control were disastrous. He released a stiff, lawyer-approved statement about a painful private matter and asked for respect for their privacy, which the public, now privy to the brutal details, found laughably hypocritical. He tried to buy the silence of the witness, but Leo Vincent was not for sale. His identity was soon revealed, and he was lauded as the gentleman stranger of Le Bernardin. The consequences for Julian were swift and brutal. Croft Innovations stock, which had been soaring in anticipation of the merger, dipped 15% at the market's opening bell. The hashtag #SellCroftStock was gaining traction. The Omnicorp board, deeply conservative and image-conscious, called an emergency meeting. The power Julian had worshipped, the power for which he had sacrificed his wife and child, was suddenly precariously slipping through his fingers. He was enraged. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. He couldn't attack the anonymous mob of public opinion, and he couldn't touch Leo Vincent, who was now shielded by the media. So he aimed his fury at the only person left. Annalise's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Annalise Julian's voice was a low growl, seething with a rage that chilled her to the bone. "You did this. You and your little sob story. You're ruining me." "I did nothing, Julian," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Chloe stood beside her, a hand on her shoulder. "You did this to yourself. You will regret this," he snarled. "I am going to make sure you get nothing, not a single penny. You think the city is on your side? Their attention span is a week. I have a lifetime to make yours miserable. This isn't over. This has just begun." He hung up. The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Annalise looked at Chloe, her eyes wide with fear. The city's support felt distant and intangible. Julian's hatred was very, very real. She knew this wasn't just a divorce anymore, it was war. And she had just been handed a declaration from a man who had never lost one. Julian Croft was not a man who accepted defeat. He saw the world as a series of battles to be won, and the battle for public opinion, for the Omnicorp merger, for his very identity, was one he intended to win by any means necessary. His initial strategy, a cold corporate statement, had backfired spectacularly. Now, he needed a new weapon. He needed to not just silence Annalise, but to discredit her so thoroughly that the public's sympathy would curdle into doubt and disgust. Working with Serafina and his pitbull lawyer Harrison, they devised a new narrative. It was a classic, ugly strategy: paint the woman as unhinged, untrustworthy, and most damningly unfaithful. A week after the Le Bernardin incident, just as the media frenzy was beginning to settle into a low simmer, a package arrived for Annalise at Chloe's apartment, delivered by a grim-faced courier. It was from Harrison's law firm. Inside was not a settlement offer, but a bombshell. It was a legal notice, a petition for divorce. But it was the grounds for the petition that made the blood drain from Annalise's face: adultery. And attached to it was a lab report, a prenatal paternity test. The report, from a high-end, discreet medical lab in Zurich, stated with cold scientific certainty that the probability of Julian Croft being the biological father of her unborn child was 0%. Annalise stared at the paper, her world tilting on its axis. It was impossible. Utterly, fundamentally impossible. She had never been with another man. Her relationship with Julian, for all its recent misery, had been exclusive. This wasn't just a lie. It was a fabrication of reality itself, a piece of paper designed to annihilate her. Chloe read it over her shoulder, her face contorting in rage. He wouldn't. He couldn't. This is monstrous. He did, Annalise whispered, sinking onto the sofa. The document was her death sentence. In one move, Julian had recast the entire story. He wasn't a cruel husband, abandoning his pregnant wife. He was the victim, a man deceived, a powerful man who had discovered a devastating betrayal. The leak was perfectly timed. Within an hour, a notorious gossip site, known for its well-placed sources in the world of the rich and famous, published an exclusive story. Julian Croft's betrayal was not what it seemed. Source confirms tech mogul discovered wife's shocking infidelity. The article detailed the alleged discovery, framing Julian's actions at Le Bernardin not as cruelty, but as a grief-stricken, impulsive reaction to learning his wife was carrying another man's child. The paternity test was mentioned, though not published, cited as irrefutable proof. The public narrative, which had been a straight line, suddenly fractured. The comments sections became a war zone. Wow, I feel like an idiot. Of course there was more to the story. So she's a gold-digging cheat. Suddenly, this makes a lot more sense. I'm not so sure. The timing is too convenient. This feels like a smear campaign. Team Annalise was now pitted against a resurgent #Justice for Julian. The certainty of the crowd was gone, replaced by the murky confusion that Julian and Serafina had engineered. Julian, seeing his opening, went on the offensive. He agreed to a single, carefully controlled interview with a sympathetic business journalist. He appeared somber, wounded. He spoke of his deep personal pain and his shattered trust. He never explicitly called Annalise an adulterer, but he didn't have to. He let the implication hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. My only goal now, he said, his voice thick with feigned emotion, is to finalize this painful chapter with dignity and privacy, and to refocus on the work that so many people depend on. He was no longer the villain, he was the stoic leader, betrayed but determined to rise above the tawdry personal drama she had allegedly created. The Omnicorp board, which had been on the verge of pulling out, paused. This new narrative was far more palatable. Julian wasn't a monster, he was a cuckold. It was messy, but it was a private mess, not a reflection of his corporate character. The merger was back on shaky but viable ground. In her Brooklyn sanctuary, Annalise felt the walls closing in. She was no longer just abandoned. She was being systematically erased and rewritten as a villain. Julian's threat, "I have a lifetime to make yours miserable," was not an empty one. He was using his immense resources to construct a lie so powerful it was becoming the truth. "What do I do?" she asked Chloe, her voice hollow. "How do I fight a DNA test? It's science. People will believe it. Then we get our own test," Chloe said, her eyes blazing with protective fire. "We prove them wrong, and we find a lawyer who will eat that shark Harrison for breakfast." Meanwhile, Leo Vincent watched the turn of events with a growing sickness in his stomach. He had started this, albeit with the best of intentions. He had championed the story of a wronged woman, and now she was being crucified in the court of public opinion. He reread his original post. "Your strength is greater than his cruelty." Had he been naive, his journalistic instincts told him something was deeply wrong. The timing of the leak, the perfectly crafted PR campaign, the sudden appearance of a paternity test from a Swiss lab. It was all too neat, too clean. It felt like a product launch, not a human tragedy. He made a decision. He wasn't just the witness anymore. He had a responsibility to the story, to the woman at its center. He had to find the truth. He started digging. He used his research skills to look into the Zurich lab, Geno Secure Diagnostics. It was real, but it was boutique catering to the ultra-wealthy, promising absolute discretion. Getting information from them would be impossible, so he changed tactics. Who benefits the most from this new narrative? Not just Julian, but the merger. He started researching the key players at Croft Innovations beyond Julian himself. His eyes landed on the COO, Serafina Vance. She was brilliant, ruthless, and had joined the company a year ago, quickly becoming Julian's indispensable right hand. Her official bio was pristine, but Leo knew that pristine bios were often the best hiding places. Annalise, spurred by Chloe's fierce loyalty, found her own spark of defiance. She would not let him brand her a liar and a cheat. She contacted a lawyer, a woman named Eleanor Vance, no relation to Serafina, a coincidence that would later prove ironic, who specialized in contentious divorces against powerful men. Eleanor was sharp, empathetic, and after hearing the story, deeply skeptical of Julian's claims. A paternity test you weren't present for, using a sample you didn't provide, arranged by your husband, who stands to lose $1 billion deal over his public image, Eleanor said during their first meeting. "This doesn't just smell bad, Annalise. This stinks to high heaven." Eleanor's first piece of advice was crucial. Do not, under any circumstances, engage with him or the media. Let them build their house of cards. A strong wind is coming. We will get our own court-admissible paternity test done, but we wait. We let them get comfortable in their lie. In the meantime, we fight on a different front. Eleanor explained that Julian's actions changing the locks, seizing her property, and launching a public smear campaign were legally actionable. They began to quietly prepare a countersuit, one based not on emotion, but on Julian's calculated financial and emotional abuse. While the lawyers prepared for war, Leo made a breakthrough. He found a disgruntled former executive assistant from Croft Innovations who had been fired by Serafina Vance 3 months prior. The assistant, a man named Marcus, was bitter and eager to talk on the condition of anonymity. Leo met him in a noisy coffee shop in Queens. "Serafina runs that place, not Julian," Marcus said, stirring his coffee with a shaking hand. "He has the vision, but she executes, and she cleans up his messes. She's obsessed with the Omnicorp deal. Sees it as her coronation as much as his." "What kind of messes?" Leo asked, his recorder running on his phone. "Anything that threatens the company's image," Marcus said. He leaned in. "A few months ago, Julian had a indiscretion with an intern. Serafina handled it. The girl disappeared with a fat NDA and a new job in another state. Serafina called it mitigating a non-essential human resources risk. That's how she talks." Then Marcus dropped the bomb. "About 2 months ago, I was asked to book a courier service, a high-priority, confidential medical shipment to a lab in Zurich. Geno-secure diagnostics." Leo's heart hammered in his chest. "What was in the shipment?" "I don't know for sure," Marcus said. "But the customs form was pre-filled by Serafina's office. It was listed as biological samples for genetic analysis, and I know whose samples they were supposed to be. The label had 2 names on it, Julian Croft and Annalise Croft." Leo stared at him. "But Annalise would have had to provide a sample, a blood draw." Marcus gave a wry smile. "You'd think so. But a week before that, Annalise had her annual physical with Julian's private doctor, Dr. Alistair Finch. The doctor whose practice is funded by a generous grant from Croft Innovations. Her blood work from that physical, I'd bet my life, was the sample that ended up in that box." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening snap. Annalise's routine physical. A compromised doctor. A vial of blood sent not to a local lab for a cholesterol check, but on a private journey to Zurich, orchestrated by Serafina Vance. They hadn't needed Annalise's consent. They had stolen her DNA. And if they could steal the sample, they could certainly tamper with the results. Leo now knew that Julian's lie was not just a lie, it was a conspiracy. It was a sophisticated, premeditated campaign to defraud not only Annalise and the public, but the very concept of truth. He had the how, he had the who. Now he just needed the final, irrefutable proof. And he had a feeling that proof was buried deep within the polished, ruthless world of Serafina Vance. The battle lines were drawn. On one side was Julian's empire of money and lies. On the other was a determined lawyer, a hunted journalist, and a pregnant woman who was finding a strength she never knew she possessed. The whole city was watching, waiting to see which side would crumble first. While Julian and Serafina were basking in the glow of their successful counteroffensive, confident they had neutralized the threat, Annalise and her small team were waging a quiet, methodical war from the cramped confines of Chloe's Brooklyn apartment. The public spectacle faded, replaced by the grim, unseen work of legal strategy and investigation. Eleanor Vance, the lawyer, was a master tactician. "He wants a public fight about morality. We'll give him a private one about legality," she stated. Her focus absolute. "He locked you out of your home. He seized marital assets. He has engaged in slander and libel with the clear intent to financially and emotionally harm you. We ignore the paternity lie for now. We attack the foundation." Eleanor filed a motion for emergency relief, demanding Annalise be granted access to marital funds and reinstated in a residence of equal standing to the penthouse. It was a standard legal move, but one Julian, in his arrogance, had not anticipated. He was forced to respond, pulling him into a legal quagmire that was far from the triumphant PR narrative he was spinning. Suddenly, he wasn't just the wronged husband. He was a defendant in a financial dispute. Annalise, meanwhile, began a transformation. The initial shock and fear were hardening into a steely resolve. She was an architect by training, a profession she had put on hold to support Julian's career. She had a mind built for structure, for seeing blueprints and understanding how things were put together. Chloe, watching her friend, saw that mind whirring back to life. "He thinks I'm just a liability," Annalise said one evening, sketching on a notepad, not a building, but a complex web diagram. "He thinks because I was a wife, I was stupid. He forgot I was there for the last 3 years. I sat in on meetings. I read his quarterly reports for typos. I heard the names." She began to map out Julian's corporate world from memory. The board members, their wives, their pet projects, the smaller companies Croft Innovations had acquired, the whispers she'd overheard about the Omnicorp deal, the rival bidders, the regulatory hurdles, the key shareholders who needed to be wooed. She was building an intelligence dossier on her own life. At the center of her diagram was Serafina Vance. Annalise had always been wary of the woman's ambition, the way her eyes lingered on Julian a second too long, the way she dismissed Annalise with a chillingly polite smile. Now she saw her not as a rival for her husband's affection, but as a co-conspirator. Simultaneously, Leo Vincent was pulling on the thread Marcus had given him. The compromised Dr. Alistair Finch was a dead end. His practice was a fortress of patient confidentiality, backed by Croft money. The Swiss lab GenoSecure was equally impenetrable. A direct assault was useless. Leo needed leverage. He went back to his source. "Marcus," he said over a burner phone, "Serafina fired you. Why? What did you see?" Marcus hesitated. "It was stupid. I misplaced a file. But it wasn't just any file. It was her Omnicorp opposition research file." "What was in it?" Leo pressed. "I only got a glance," Marcus said. "But it wasn't about the company. It was about the people. Specifically, Robert Harrington, Omnicorp's CEO. She had everything on him. Financial records, his kids' college applications, even transcripts of therapy sessions." "How could she get therapy transcripts?" Leo asked, horrified. "She has methods," Marcus replied darkly. "She uses a shadowy firm of ex-intelligence agents. They call themselves strategic risk consultants. They dig up dirt, blackmail, leverage, whatever it takes." That file was Serafina's insurance policy to make sure the deal went through no matter what. This was the leverage Leo needed. This went beyond a messy divorce. This was corporate espionage, illegal surveillance. This was the kind of crime that didn't just tank a merger, it led to prison sentences. He shared his findings with Annalise and Eleanor. The three of them, the wronged wife, the tenacious lawyer, and the investigative journalist, formed an unlikely but formidable alliance. Eleanor's eyes lit up with a cold fire. "This is it. This is the wind that brings down his house of cards. But we need proof, a copy of that file or a witness who will testify on the record." The task seemed impossible. Serafina was too careful to leave digital copies lying around. Marcus was too terrified to go public. Annalise stared at the diagram she had drawn. Her eyes traced the lines connecting names and companies. Then she stopped. "Wait a minute," she said, her voice quiet. "I might know a way, not to get the file, but to make Serafina show her hand." She pointed to a name on the periphery of her diagram. "Arthur Galloway. He's on the Omnicorp board. He's the swing vote. Everyone thinks he's a staunch supporter of the merger, but I know he's not." "How do you know?" Eleanor asked. "Because his wife Helen is a passionate art collector. She's the head of a foundation that preserves historical architecture. 6 months ago, I was at a charity dinner with her. Julian was ignoring me as usual, so I spent an hour talking to Helen. She told me Arthur was secretly against the deal because Croft Innovations has a reputation for buying historic properties and gutting them for modern office space. He was being pressured by the rest of the board to vote yes. Helen was furious about it. A plan began to form, one that relied not on digital warfare, but on old-fashioned human connection. Leo, using his press credentials, requested an interview with Arthur Galloway, ostensibly about the future of tech mergers. To his surprise, Galloway agreed. He was a man under pressure and perhaps saw a chance to subtly voice his concerns. Before the interview, Annalise wrote a letter. It wasn't an angry, accusatory letter. It was a heartfelt personal note addressed to Helen Galloway. She wrote about her love for architecture, her respect for Helen's work, and the conversation they had shared. She then gently, carefully explained that the man whose company threatened the heritage Helen worked to preserve was the same man trying to use a fraudulent paternity test to take her child and her future. She didn't ask for help. She simply told her truth, woman to woman. She included a copy of the pristine court-admissible results of a new paternity test which Eleanor had arranged with a reputable lab in New York. It stated with 99.999% certainty that Julian Croft was indeed the father. Leo delivered the letter to Galloway at the end of their interview. "This is off the record," he said, handing him the sealed envelope. "It's a personal matter from Annalise Croft to your wife." Galloway looked at the envelope, then at Leo, his expression unreadable. He took it without a word. Now they had to wait. They had laid a trap, not for Julian, but for the far more dangerous Serafina. They knew that when Arthur Galloway confronted his board with doubts, Serafina's first move would be to neutralize him. And to do that, she would have to use the dirty information in her opposition research file. She would have to reveal her methods. Days turned into a week. The silence was agonizing. Julian's lawyers were burying Eleanor in paperwork. The press had moved on to other scandals. It felt as if their gambit had failed. Annalise began to doubt herself, the hope that had flickered within her starting to dim. Then Leo's burner phone rang. It was an encrypted call from a number he didn't recognize. "Is this Leo Vincent?" a disguised voice asked. "Who is this?" "Yeah, a friend," the voice said. "You don't know me, but you reached out to my boss, Arthur Galloway." His wife read the letter. She was moved. "Then 2 days ago, my boss received an anonymous email. It contained a transcript of a very private conversation he'd had with his doctor. An email that suggested his position on the Omnicorp board could be re-evaluated if he didn't show full-throated support for the merger. It was the blackmail. Serafina had taken the bait. "My boss is a man of principle," the voice continued. "He will not be intimidated, and he will not be a party to corporate espionage or the destruction of an innocent woman. He has authorized me to forward you that email along with other supporting documents about the strategic risk consultants hired by Croft Innovations. Use them. Burn them to the ground." The call ended. A moment later, a file appeared in Leo's encrypted inbox. He opened it. It was all there. The blackmail email, invoices from the risk consultants, and best of all, a sworn affidavit from Arthur Galloway detailing the threat and stating his intention to present this evidence to the authorities and the entire Omnicorp board. They had her. They had Julian. They had everything. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place at that evening's news. Croft Innovations, in a display of supreme confidence, announced a major press conference and reception for the following night at the iconic Rainbow Room. The purpose to celebrate the imminent and successful finalization of the Omnicorp merger. All board members from both companies, major investors, and the press would be there. Julian and Serafina were planning their victory party. Annalise looked at Eleanor and Leo, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face. "They've just sent out invitations to their own execution," she said. "And we're going to be front row." The Rainbow Room, perched 65 floors above Manhattan, was a dizzying spectacle of power and opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a city glittering like a carpet of diamonds. Champagne flowed, a string quartet played softly, and the air crackled with the energy of a multi-billion-dollar victory. Julian Croft stood at the center of it all, a conquering hero. At his side, Serafina Vance was radiant, her smile as sharp and brilliant as the diamond necklace she wore. They were untouchable gods on their Olympus. They had no idea that Nemesis, in the form of a 5 months pregnant architect, was riding the elevator up to meet them. Annalise had refused to hide. She chose a simple, elegant crimson dress, the color of defiance. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was minimally made up, but her eyes held a new, unshakable strength. She was not the weeping, humiliated woman from Le Bernardin. She was a woman on a mission. Beside her, Eleanor Vance looked every bit the legal powerhouse she was, her briefcase containing the documents that would act as a guillotine. Leo Vincent was already inside, having secured a press pass. He stood near the back, a silent observer, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had already given his explosive story, under embargo, to the New York Times journalist he trusted. It was set to publish online the moment he gave the signal. As Annalise and Eleanor entered the room, a hush fell over the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers erupted like wildfire. This was not part of the script. Julian's face, which had been beaming, froze into a mask of disbelief and fury. Serafina's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. Security guards started to move towards them. "It's all right," Julian said, through gritted teeth, waving them off. A public scene was the last thing he wanted. He strode towards Annalise, his voice a low, threatening growl meant only for her. "What in God's name do you think you're doing here, Annalise? This is a private event." "I'm a shareholder, Julian," Annalise replied, her voice calm and clear, causing those nearby to lean in. "A small one from our marital assets, but a shareholder nonetheless, and I have some concerns I'd like to raise about the new management." She looked pointedly at Serafina, who had now glided to Julian's side, her hand possessively on his arm. Serafina Annalise said, her tone level. "That's a beautiful necklace. Is that the one that was purchased last week using a corporate account intended for client acquisition?" Serafina paled. It was a bluff, a calculated guess from Annalise's knowledge of Julian's habits, but it hit its mark. Before Julian could explode, Robert Harrington, the CEO of Omnicorp, and Arthur Galloway approached, their faces grim. Julian Harrington said, his voice cold, "We have a problem." Arthur Galloway looked past Julian and met Annalise's eyes, giving her a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was the signal. "What problem?" Julian blustered. "The deal is done. We're celebrating." "No, we're not." Galloway said loudly, his voice cutting through the chatter. The deal is off. Omnicorp is officially withdrawing its offer of merger with Croft Innovations. The string quartet faltered. The entire room went silent. You could hear a pin drop from 65 floors up. Julian stared at him dumbfounded. "What are you talking about, Arthur?" The board voted. It was unanimous. It was Galloway agreed. But that was before I was made aware of certain business practices employed by your COO. He looked directly at Serafina. Practices that include illegal surveillance and blackmail against members of my own board to secure that vote. He held up his phone, and on the screen was a copy of the threatening email Serafina had sent him. I and several other board members have already spoken to the SEC and the District Attorney's Office. A formal investigation into Croft Innovations is being opened as we speak. Panic flashed across Serafina's face, pure, unadulterated terror. She looked at Julian, expecting him to fix it, to deploy his power. But Julian was staring at her with dawning horror. "You did what," he whispered, his voice hoarse. But Annalise wasn't finished. She stepped forward, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "And while they investigate your corporate crimes," she said, her gaze sweeping across the stunned audience of investors and journalists, "perhaps we can clear up a personal matter." She turned to Julian. "You told the world I was unfaithful. You told them I was carrying another man's child. You produced a fraudulent document to ruin my name and save your billion-dollar deal." She opened her purse and took out a folded paper. "This is a court-admissible paternity test, Julian, taken last week. It confirms you are the father of our child." She didn't hand it to him. She handed it to the most prominent journalist in the room. Then Eleanor Vance stepped forward, her voice sharp and prosecutorial. "Furthermore," she announced, "we have a sworn statement from a former employee of Croft Innovations, a Mr. Marcus Thorne, who has decided to testify under oath that he was instructed by Ms. Serafina Vance to courier a blood sample belonging to Annalise Croft and obtained, without her consent, from a compromised physician to a lab in Zurich. A lab, which our investigators have discovered, received a wire transfer of $200,000 from a shell corporation owned by Miss Vance the day before they issued their false report. Every detail was a nail being hammered into their coffins. Serafina, the master manipulator, was completely exposed. Her web of lies had been unraveled for all to see. She began to back away, her eyes darting towards the exit. Julian, finally understanding the depth of the deception and the totality of his ruin, turned on her. The love, the partnership was gone, replaced by pure, uncut rage. "You did this!" he screamed at Serafina, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You faked the test. You blackmailed the board. You ruined me. I did it for us," she shrieked back, her composure shattering. "You wanted this merger. I got it for you. I wanted the merger, not a federal indictment." It was a grotesque spectacle. The two masterminds of this cruel campaign now tearing each other apart before the very people they had sought to impress. The press was in a frenzy. Phones were up, recording every second. Leo Vincent in the back hit send on a text message to the Times journalist. The story was now live. Annalise watched them for a moment, not with triumph, but with a kind of weary sadness. She had not come here for revenge. She had come for the truth. While Julian and Serafina were screaming at each other, she turned and walked away. The crowd parted for her like the sea. They were no longer looking at a victim or a villain. They were looking at a woman who had faced down an empire and won. As she reached the door, Julian saw her leaving. His anger at Serafina was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a sudden, desperate realization of what he had truly lost. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the deal. It was her. "Annalise," he called out, his voice cracking. "Wait!" She stopped at the threshold, but didn't turn around. "Please," he begged, his voice now pathetic, stripped of all its power. "We can fix this." Annalise finally turned her head slightly, looking at him over her shoulder. The man who had called her a liability, who had left her alone and pregnant, who had tried to destroy her character. She saw him now for what he was: small, weak, and utterly bankrupt in everything that mattered. "No, Julian," she said, her voice soft but final. "There's nothing left to fix. You built your life on a foundation of lies. Now you get to live in the rubble." She turned and walked out of the Rainbow Room, leaving the chaos behind her, and stepped into the elevator, descending back to the real world, a free woman. The gala of reckoning was over. Her new life was just beginning. In the end, Julian Croft's empire, built on a ruthless pursuit of power, crumbled under the weight of its own lies. The Omnicorp deal evaporated, taking his fortune with it. Serafina Vance faced multiple federal charges, her brilliant career ending in disgrace. And Julian, he lost everything: his money, his reputation, and the family he so casually threw away. He tried to apologize, to bargain, to win Annalise back, but she had already moved on. Annalise didn't just survive, she thrived. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, whom she named Chloe, after the friend who gave her shelter in her darkest hour. She restarted her architecture firm, focusing on sustainable, community-focused projects, and found a success that was meaningful and real. Leo Vincent's career was reignited by his role in the story, and he remained a close, trusted friend to Annalise and her daughter. She had been pushed to the edge, but instead of falling, she learned how to fly. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about wealth or power, but about integrity. It shows that one person's courage, amplified by the kindness of a stranger, can indeed move a city. What did you think of Julian's downfall? Was it justice? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And for more incredible true-life dramas and inspiring stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.